let's talk about, I wanted to talk about the 2003 team. And I get it. Like the 2004 team is the team that won the national title. The 2003 team, I got to see up close and personal. We played you guys in a super regional when I was at Arizona State. And I would argue it was the best team we had at Arizona State in my 6 years. We had 5 big leaguers on the field. They were all position players. That was problematic. But we had 5. I mean, like you only have 9 position players in your lineup, and 5 of them were big leaguers. You know, we have Pedroia at short. We have Ethier in center field. We have Travis Buck in right. Like he was 6 straight opening day rosters. Jeff Larish at first base. Tuffy Ghost with catching. And your 2003 team, here's the problem for us seeing you guys in a super regional. You had 10 big leaguers on this roster, 10 of them. So here's where I want to start. I'm going to list off those 10 big leaguers. By the way, 2 of them redshirted. How about that's how good, to your point a second ago, Dave, that's how good you guys had it rolling. You had 2 future big leaguers that you redshirted on this team. So here are the guys: Chad Cordero, Shane Costa, Wes Littleton, Jason Windsor, Kurt Suzuki, Justin Turner. I swear I'm going to find a box score. Justin Turner hit 9th for part of that year. He hit 3rd for the Dodgers. Yeah, he hit 1st and 2nd at the end of the year. Ricky Romero, Blake Davis, Brett Pill, Danny Dorn. And Danny Dorn took him the longest, I think, to get to the big leagues, and that was super, super cool. But so, George, I'll start with you. And by the way, some of my favorite Titans, I didn't even get the list off there, like P.J. Piliteri, Ronnie Prettyman, Sean Martin. I mean, there's so many great names and players on that team. But I want you to pick one player each. So, George, if I only let you talk about one of those players, who would you pick and why?
Whoa. Well, it's the 03 team. I'm going to talk about Shane Costa. I'll let Dave talk about the pitching. Shane, unfortunately, wasn't around the next year when we were successful, but what a player he was, right? Not only as tough as it comes, but what a leader. He was the kind of kid that I'd go to him or we'd go to him, and maybe we weren't getting what we thought out of the players. And, hey, Shane, you need to fix this. And he was a one-word fixer because he had that kind of respect from his teammates. And he averaged 25 hit batters every single year. He wasn't going to get out of the way. He stood on the plate, extremely strong, and had a good run in Omaha that year, and made his way to the major leagues. And he's, I guess, one of the prototypical definitions of what a Titan player is all about. Right? Doesn't say much. One of our favorite saying is, "What you do is so loud we can't hear what you say." Shane might have said 10 things in his career at Fullerton, but man, he did a lot of special things. And he was a model of consistency and toughness, and poster child for the way we like to play the game at Cal State Fullerton.
Was he from Temecula or something like that? Where was he from?
Visalia.
Oh, got it. Was Boyer from? I felt like there was another really physical player on that team. Yeah. You described him perfectly, George. Like Costa was very physical. I believe he was a really good draft pick at the end, right? Was he a 1st or 2nd round or something like that? Yeah. But you're right. Like he was like, that's the perfect star player, right? Like he's, 20 hit by pitch, 25 stolen bases, could, run a ball into the gap or out of the yard at any time, but also like played like he thought you guys were taking his uniform from him or something. Oh, it's crazy. Hookie, Who would you pick? You go next. Who would you pick?
I'll go with the midget, Karopsy.
That's a great call.
He was a bad boy, and he was a Titan. He was the Titan. He wanted to be a Titan from the time that he was 12 years old. He was what we built our program around. Yep. He was a bad boy, and he knew how to play. And, he was a tough little dude. He batted 3rd for us for a couple of years at 5'5". But it was, he was a baseball player and a good one. And that's what we had baseball players. You talk about Costa. Yeah, he was a big, strong athlete, but he was a baseball player.
Yeah, he was.
We recruited baseball players, and he was a baseball player.
Yep. You guys created real recruiting dilemmas for other programs like us, like others, because we'd play you in the postseason and get beat. And then you go out recruiting. It's like, okay, like you just got beat by David Bacani and Jason Karofsky, but do you have the courage to sign him, right? Like, do you have the courage to give that 5'7" right second baseman scholarship money, right? Like, but now, of course, you guys had such great contacts, and whereas, you know, for us, you'd be kind of rolling the dice at a stranger, you guys were, you know, I felt like I was thinking of this analogy tonight. Recruiting against you guys was like we were Arizona State. We had every modern technology you could have to go fishing with, and you guys were the ones that just knew the water, right? Like you knew all the holes where the good fish were, and we're just, I don't want to paint it like we were totally clueless or anything. Obviously, we had good players too, but yeah, it was fascinating. Dave, who are you going with?
I'm going to go with Chad Cordero. But before you went over that list, Runes, and what makes me proud is that, in today's day of recruiting, and even though it has changed a little bit and it's slowed down a little bit, 2 of those 10 guys you talked about were commits in June of their senior year, Danny Dorn and Ricky Romero. We started recruiting them in May of their senior year, and they both committed in June. So, I'll get back to Chad in a minute, but you bring up the recruiting part. Both Hookie and I work for a boss that's very competitive, and we used to go and have to tell George all the time about getting beat by Arizona State and USC and UCLA and Stanford and University of San Diego when Rich Hill was there with Valenzuela and Jay Johnson. We weren't the first choice by a lot of people. We had the knack. We had a lot of contacts. We used that. And we were able to find the baseball players. So you hit it on the head. We found the baseball players, and I think it makes us all proud.
Can I interject?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Dave. You done?
Go for it. Yeah.
No, I'm not
He's going to come back to Chad. Go ahead. You go first, George, and then come back to Cordero.
Well, this isn't patting ourselves on the back. Rick said baseball players, Dave's feel, Rick's feel, hopefully my feel, our network, right? We would have taken Pedroia over Bacani.
That's a good point.
Right?
Yeah,
Ethier. I kind of did a little bit of homework because that was a long time ago, this stuff you're asking about, right? And I looked, and you guys were 27-1 to start the season that year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you had some.
We were 52-12 when we showed up at your guys' place. We had a nice year.
I would say, these guys on the show with me and hopefully me, we didn't need a projected pro guy. There were years we didn't have one area code guy that we recruited, and we were really happy with our recruits. And out of those 10 guys, a couple of them redshirted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a tribute, I think, to them, the design of our program. But only 3 of those 10 were drafted out of high school. So that we think that they're doing, and our, let's say, projection and the fact that like Murph's yelling at you, hey, we need to get some of these guys. And the area scouts are getting yelled at by the supervisors. How can you not have that guy in, and now he's a second rounder? Right. And we felt like people were trailing Rick and Dave and I and finding out who we were talking to, right? We had that. It's the players' credit, but we had that kind of reputation that, God, Cal State Fullerton's recruiting him. He's going to end up being a really good player, play in Omaha, and get drafted. And that always didn't run its course that way, right? There's some guys that I was yelling at Rick and Dave about, why didn't we get this guy? Just like Murph did to you and Jay and all of his staffs. Us darn head coaches want all the good players, don't we?
That's right. Dave, I'm so glad you're going to tell us about Cordero, because this is I remember, I think 2003 was his freshman year. No, 2001 was his freshman year. And then 2003, he was in the big leagues that September. But I remember he shows up at your guys' place in 2001. He's not on any recruiting list to my knowledge. And it's just multiple arm slots, just absolute gasoline. And, to your point, George, Jay and I are looking at Murph. I don't know what to tell you. This dude was in a hole for all we know. I don't know where he came from. So go ahead, Dave. Tell us about Chad.
Well, Chad Cordero, known as the chief within our program, flat bill and all, came out of Don Lugo, which is about 30 minutes from our campus. I saw him in a summer league, 85, 87, projectable. The thing I liked the most about him was he pounded the strike zone. He pounded the strike zone with 2 angles and 2 arm slots. And then he started ticking up his senior year. He started climbing velocity wise. We ended up getting him drafted by the Padres, a late draft by the Padres, which kind of surprised us and worried us a little bit. Long Beach State was also recruiting him. I remember when I went in the house, Long Beach had already talked to him, and then luckily we were able to get him. Very similar to Shane, to Costa. You know, Chad was a very unassuming guy. He didn't say a lot. He smiled a lot. You know, I will say this, we did protect Chad a little bit. Hookie had a big part of the program in many ways, but Hookie was in charge of the conditioning for our team, which I think built mental toughness within that organization. And Chad wasn't a good runner at all. And he couldn't keep up with the rest of the team. And Chad was so respected by his teammates and so liked by his teammates. Hookie used to do something different for him that he did for no other player. They used to go 45 minutes of conditioning, and they had to finish with 9 stadiums for 9 innings in the soccer stadium behind the third base dugout. Well, he only used to have Chad run the 8th and 9th because that's when he was going to close out the game. And those are the only 2. The rest of the teamers running 9 times up to that stadium to the top after 45 minutes of conditioning, and Cordero was only having to do 2. But that was the respect he had. And you know, the thing about Chief that was amazing is, in inter-squad games, when we tried to get him some work in a game, if we went through a weekend and we didn't need a closer, he got roughed up a little bit. But when it was the game on the line, there was nobody better. And you know, those were the days when we didn't know spin rates. You know, Windsor
Right.
and Windsor and Cordero were in the days we didn't know spin rates, but those 2 young men had unbelievable spin rates because they pitched off their fastball. We had another guy named John Smith, a left-hander, same thing. Those guys threw that invisible fastball and threw a lot of them, and guys just couldn't catch up to them. And they weren't, you know, they were anywhere from 88 to 92, not blazing in today's, but they had that invisible fastball. And yeah, Chad was a great story, and for him to get to the big league so quickly, and like I said, very unassuming guy, but just a big smile all the time, and just was very clutch for that team and for all the 3 teams he played on.